Welcome to Bitcoin Escape Plan. You may have noticed this giant red candle on your chart, and today we're going to talk about what it means for the price momentum moving forward, as well as the key indicators of why the price is behaving this way and what we should expect moving forward. Later on in the video, I will go over the higher time frame analysis, just so we have an accurate picture of what is going on broadly over the course of the year. And then at the end, I will go over my most recent trade and just kind of give you some ongoing analysis of how to use the 4-hour chart and the Bollinger Band specifically to find more accurate entries and exits for your Bitcoin spot and leverage positions. If you are new to the channel, you should go over to bitcoinescapeplan.com. If you subscribe, every Monday I release a detailed price analysis that goes over the historical context for the price, as well as just talking about what's going on locally. Super helpful if you just want to be able to reference that quickly when you are not here on YouTube. Go check it out, bitcoinescapeplan.com. All right, let's get into it with the price. As always, what's the most important thing we talk about on this channel? Leave it in the comments down below. You already know it is the anchored VWAP. This is the middle band of the elder VWAP. This is the one that I have drawn from 2011 to now. I never touch it. It's great. And look where the price went. Price went right to it like a magnet. Now, we did close this previous 4-hour close slightly above it. As you can see right now, we are breaking below it, and we need to wait another hour and a half to see if the price can reclaim above it or if it needs to break. And it does look like we want to go lower towards this 65K target. Which is not terrible. We'll go over that later on the higher time frames. I know it looks terrible, but not terrible depending on how we react to that Fibonacci pivot, because psychologically speaking, it's still above the 50% retracement mark, which again, I'll go over a little bit later on in the video. So what kind of caused this? What caused this was over here on Thursday, we started to see failure on, this is the other anchored VWAP. This is the downtrend anchored VWAP from the 126 all-time high. And it tells us something very different than what this one does over here. So this, again, this is from the absolute lows of 2011 to now. It's giving us the anchored volume average, since then. And then this guy is the one from the most recent highs. So this is kind of telling us our momentum to the downside. This is kind of telling us our momentum to the upside. And the two of them together, it tells very clearly where the price is going to break. Now, we've talked about this before. We're waiting for around the middle of April to get confirmation of whether we're going to go higher or lower. Us breaking this trend line is not a great sign. It's not great. Not the end of the world. This is from the 59.9K low over here. So that is what that trend line is indicating. And even quite frankly, I don't know that this is drawn perfectly for the lower time frames. I believe I have that for the higher time frames. So we probably broke it a while ago, to be honest with you, on the lower time frames. And this will need to be redrawn very soon. But again, I'm assuming the price is going to react favorably to the 65K pivot and then hopefully head back in the opposite direction. But we'll see. We're kind of getting into the time of year where we should expect more significant failures on the weekly SMA. And we may have already seen that, which again, higher time frame. I'll talk about that in a little bit. So at the moment, once we lost that bottom band of the anchored VWAP, this is the other downtrend. This is from the the first peak after that 59.9K. As you can see, we broke that one a million times, so it's not super relevant, but it is just important to see. Price struggled with it over here last Sunday, and price ripped right through it like tissue paper this time. It did not care at all. It didn't even care about this 67.1K Fibonacci pivot, and it's not always going to care. Sometimes the higher time frames are just going to dictate that we need to get pulled lower. There's a lot of global uncertainty in markets right now, and Bitcoin is going to be the punching bag in those circumstances. There's no way around it. That's just how it works, kids. I hate to break it to you. So in the short term, what we want to see is we want to get our 4-hour closes back above about 65.9K. If we can start to get our 4-hour closes back above 65.9K, that gives us permission to get back above this trend line, which I would imagine will interact with around 66.5, which we have talked about before in previous videos. And then we pretty much just need to see getting back to this downtrend, which now is much lower than here. This is at 67.7 that we interact with it, and we're more likely to interact with it again around 67.5, 67.4, depending on how many 4-hour candles it takes us to get back through that 67.1 pivot. And we won't know until we have a definitive reaction to 65, which I'm really hoping, again, that it does not drop much lower than that. We really do not want to give up that middle band. You know, like our last interaction with the middle band was healthy. That was good. We did have breaks prior to that are not as good, but that's pretty much what we're seeing happen with the price now. Is this is a magnet, and we just depolarized or opposite polarized on this magnet down to this one, and now we are repolarizing and deciding, do we snap back in this direction for another retest, or do we shoot lower and continue toward the lower band, which this is a good context for jumping into the higher time frames. The lower band for the Elder VWAP is currently at 36.8K. And if you have been following this channel for any period of time, you know I believe that the price can go as low as 34 to 39K. That does not guarantee that it's going to do so, but that is what the 4-hour anchored VWAP is telling us, is that there is a possibility the price could go there. And our point of control for volume is at 27.1K right now. That means that the majority of people that bought probably in 2022 or 2021. That's where the bulk of the volume is. We also have a large bulk of volume right where we are now. So there is a decent amount of volume that's stepping up. I'm still waiting to see if this starts to thin out as we get higher. That has not been the case at the moment. This guy is just filling out more, which is kind of why I'm not super worried at the moment. But we will go into the higher time frame context of why it is more likely that we rise temporarily and then ultimately fail. And as you can see right now, March is bearish. So for all those people who say we can't get 6 red months in a row, you're wrong at the moment, my friends. You know, it's not very good for what we want to see for the end of March, which I think is what, Sunday, Monday that it's over. So very quickly, or I guess Wednesday it's over. We don't have a lot of time for the price to get back to minimum. The price needs to get back above about 67K for us to be essentially neutral for the month. Like, forget bullish for the month. We're talking being neutral instead of being continued bearish. Now, there is a possibility that if we are pretty neutral, or even this guy is not terrible, you know, that may be enough for us to see a pump in April, as we have seen in past years. And if we take a look at that historical context real quick. So here we have a drop in January. Now, obviously, we had our peak in January. And then we had a rise into February. I believe it was the opposite now, where we had our rise in January, and then it continued down lower into February. As you can see, that continued into March. That is not currently what we are seeing. We are seeing the opposite, that we continue to break down. And really, our chart looks more like this guy than over here, where we currently are. So we're pulled to the right quite a bit, or pulled to the left, rather. What do I mean by that? What I mean is we're experiencing the sharper volatility earlier than we typically do. Now, there could be a variety of reasons for that. Very similar to over here in 2018 as well, where we saw a rise in January that ultimately resulted in a failure. Then the price continued to drop into March, which is a little bit more similar to what we're seeing. Again, these are, you got to imagine, these are all red candles. So we're seeing it more sharp now, though technically speaking, this is a more severe drop from this top to this 50% retracement. That's actually like a 72% retracement, not a 52% retracement, or 50% retracement rather. So that's still what we're expecting. It's mostly chop at this time of the year that ultimately fails to the downside. Now, there's a possibility always that, you know, Trump and the powers that be want to play some type of trick on us where we're going to instead continue to break down and then just pump randomly out of nowhere. That is the thing that you have to keep in mind with Bitcoin, is it's still really small, still very small. We're talking about an asset that is at the moment probably worth less than $2 trillion, which is just not large enough that other financial players are unable to bully it. It's very easy for an asset of this size to be bullied. We really need it to be at hundreds of trillions of dollars before it can be, widely manipulated the same way. And even then, to think that the banks aren't going to actively manipulate this, I think is really foolish. Like, it just doesn't make sense with reality. So the weekly time frame tells us a little bit more clearly. As you can see, this is not what we wanted to see. We wanted to see a close closer to here for the week. While that is not impossible, that is super unlikely. And obviously, I'll give my update on Sunday and Monday. That it goes over the actual close and kind of what it means moving forward. On Monday and Sunday, I'll just kind of give my update on what we're seeing locally now, which I would imagine is going to be continued downside. Like the 1 hour is pretty much the same, where we've also lost a lot of our key levels. And there's nothing really preventing the price from continuing to trend lower. So on the weekly time frame, that's what we're watching play out at the moment. Is we failed off of 76.2 and we need to retest 64. Now there's a possibility, again, that we don't quite get there. As you can see, price is kind of regarding 65.7 as a small form of support. And again, that the elder VWAP is at about 65.9. Which is only slightly higher. So right around this region, how the price behaves here over the next couple 4 hours is very important. Basically Saturday is going to be kind of important. I'm going to the beach on Saturday. I'm going to chill. I'm going to have a great day, but we're probably going to see continued downside if Bitcoin can't start to get a couple victories above 65.9K. And it is what it is. You just got to be realistic and trade the chart that you have, not the chart that you want. So what I would be looking for in the short term is at the end of this week, this weekly SMA is going to be pulled down lower. It is currently sitting at 80.5K, which is already considerably lower than when we talked about it on Wednesday. And it will continue to drop lower, especially if we close here. This is not only going to break through that 80K pivot, but it's probably going to be sitting right on top of that 76.2K pivot. So it is still my estimation, and the number is changing. Unfortunately, it gets lower and lower every day, but it is still my estimation that we will have another impulse higher that will be regarded as a failure, that will be regarded as resistance. It doesn't really matter if we hit the Fibonacci pivot first or the weekly SMA first. It just means that one of them is going to form as support and the other one's going to form as resistance, and ultimately the resistance is going to win. Or not even support. I wouldn't even call this, like, if price just randomly, so say that the weekly SMA gets down to right here, and then price is able to get like to back here for the close, and then for whatever reason we just shoot up to here during that week, the SMA is still going to be sitting right there. We may not have enough momentum to actually break through 76.2K. So I just think by the time that we actually interact with that weekly SMA, I think it's going to be either at that pivot or below that pivot, which means even when we interact with it, either this is going to form as resistance or this is going to form as resistance. And it doesn't really matter. There's just like not enough telling us that it's going to be to the contrary. Like, we don't have anyone defending these levels. There is nobody there at the party. There's nothing going on there. We have a lot of people here that are uncertain, that are both selling and buying here. This has been a very, very active range. And again, if we are able to rise back through this, then we're in the same scenario where we need all of these people to not panic. All of those people have to decide, I want to keep my IBIT, I want to keep my MSTR, I want to keep my Bitcoin. Instead of saying, Jesus, you know what, I'm down a lot of money and I'd rather take a 5 or a 10% haircut than a 30, 40% haircut. That's just reality. That's human psychology. Some people are going to make that decision. So what we're looking for now again is, are we able to see some strength on that 4-hour Fibonacci pivot around 65K? That would be great, because we don't want to see price touch 64K. We want to see price have some strength, some support above 64K, which would give us permission to trend higher again. If we start showing weakness at 64K, it's just not super likely that we're going to head to 76 instead of breaking lower than 64, which we don't want. We do not want. We want this one final leg to flush out a little bit before sustained breakdown. And even, with everything that's happening globally, I think that there's just like too much uncertainty to randomly believe that we're going to go super higher. I was watching another channel that I respect earlier, and he's talking about how it's like possible that we see like 80, 90, 100K still later in the year. And that does not make sense to me. I don't understand where he is pulling that that analysis and diagnosis from. As far as I'm aware, the stablecoins do not fully enter the market until January of next year. I know that the law that they passed, the Genius Act or whatever, should go fully into effect in July, assuming they don't continue postponing it, which to my knowledge, they have not passed it or made any meaningful movements in that direction. And the longer that they keep kicking that can down the road and, keep having basically just like buy the rumor, sell the news events, like we just saw, I think like 16 crypto assets became commodities, which is long-term bullish for sure. But what have we seen happen with the price? The price has just continued to drop since that news. So I really feel like it's going to be the same thing in July, where they make the announcement, where maybe they come to an agreement on the crypto market structure bill and the Genius Act, and it's going to be the same thing, where maybe we see a rise into the anticipation of that news, and then we're going to see a sell-off right after, So globally speaking, broadly speaking, I would still anticipate that we're going to chop for a bit and see one impulse higher, and then ultimately that is going to capitulate in failure. We don't have any precedent for it doing otherwise. Now, it's not to say that price is always going to behave the same. Like in 2017, we didn't have a major drop off in the middle. We just had our blow off top and then we continued. Whereas for both 2021 and 2025, we saw kind of a double peak scenario. Like this is 110-ish, which certainly was a new all-time high at the time, absolutely, and we dropped lower before finally rising higher. So there's not really any reason to assume that we're not going to see the flip side of that as well, which is just continued failures of the weekly SMA. Whether we are able to break above it or not is kind of irrelevant at this point, because it does not favor us staying above it for any period of time, even if we are able to break it. So I don't know what those people are talking about when they say that we could see 80, 90 higher. I don't see it. They have a lot more money than me, so maybe they know something that I do not. But that does not make sense to me. What makes sense to me is this is probably going to form as resistance, because this is going to put pressure down on it. Even if we do manage to break above it, it's not going to be like this. It's not going to be like a major snap to the upside if we break above it. Like we don't have any precedent for it behaving that way. We get a small spike above it, and then it continues to drop. Yeah. I mean, the only correlation would be if we randomly, for some reason, now just every year experience a bull market year, which doesn't make any fucking sense to me. Like that we would experience that. That's our only option, is maybe since 2024 things have changed, and now we see initial peaks and then retracements that are followed by perma bull markets. And in that case, we may be seeing the same thing, where we see our initial peak earlier in the year, and then we drop down. Like, let's see what, come on, sticky keys, work with me. We saw about a 30% retracement from that local high And if we were to take that from here, we're probably already sitting there, to be honest. I hate you so much. Just do what I ask. Jesus Christ. Measurement tool, so useful. I don't know why it doesn't allow me to do that whenever I try and use it. It's great. We're already lower than that, or rather we have been lower than that. So, and again, we're comparing that to this is the ETFs. So ETFs are released, money flows into it, money flows out, money flows back in. You know, we don't have any news story or narrative. You know, the strategic Bitcoin reserve, nothing has happened from that. Nothing has happened. The US has not continued to set up, you know, automated buys. They have invaded Venezuela. You know, they have hacked Chinese hackers to take the crypto from what is essentially the customers of the exchange that the Chinese hackers stole it from. We're not seeing any of the narratives that we were sold come true. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm perma bearish. That does not mean that, you know, I don't believe that the price is going to go higher eventually. I absolutely do. I would not have a channel called Bitcoin Escape Plan if I didn't believe that Bitcoin was the answer to financial prosperity. Not financial advice. Like and subscribe. The the reality is just that we need to see sustained breakdown still before the price has reset and is able to really go higher. And for anyone who's saying we didn't see a blow off top and therefore we're not going to see prolonged downside as well, I don't think that that's true. I think that Bitcoin is math, not just money, and it does behave in predictable ways. And again, if we see strength at 65, there's a possibility we go back in this direction. Less and less every day, I think, of 86, like I had talked about in previous videos. And God forbid, 96. I feel like the last time I talked about that and believed it was probably January or December. I don't think I really believe it anymore. But that's what we are expecting to see is if we touch 64, I would expect we break down below that pivot. And I don't think we're going to react to it that way. I think we're going to react to it negatively and continue down. Maybe stopping at this one, 53.4K, kind of arbitrary. It's going to be the same thing. This is no man's land. We do not want the price to casually touch that because it makes it harder to predict if it's going to stay there or not. Before we get into the trade, if we take the context of, you know, when I look for entries, what I'm looking for is a break of the Bollinger Band. So technically speaking, a break of the Bollinger Band on any time frame, this is the weekly time frame, typically to the bottom, is regarded as a long. So now this guy, you could have longed any of these and you would have been correct. Now you would have had to take profits on that trade, otherwise you would be very much not correct. But this is probably going to be the same thing, where this will be regarded as a long. You may already have been invalidated, quite frankly. You know, this may already have been the take profit. And the reality is this is going to continue to drop further and further into the bands now. You know, same thing to the upside. To the upside, we saw a break on the weekly. Would have been very, very clear at that time to take a short. I didn't understand it as well back then. I really wish I did. Would have been nice. I did sell some around then, but not nearly as much as I would have liked. So that's what we're looking for when we're looking for entries, is we're looking for breaks. Ideally a candle like this. That's a pretty candle. That's a good candle. That's what we want. One of these guys where we have two candles that are closing together. And that tells us, all right, cool. Price has decided this is important and now it wants a reversal. So let's check out the 4-hour time frame. See where these trades are at. So this is where I took my short and then I flipped it to a long, and I've been wrong ever since. This was very foolish. Had I just kept with my initial, there's no rule for taking a long here. This is silly. This is very silly. There is a rule for taking a short there, and that's what I fucking did before I just let it start to really go against me. Now, what I'm looking for here, other than, you know, just losing all my money for fun, I really would like to see what the reaction is here. If the reaction there is negative, then I need to accept that I'm going to lose basically like 50% of my money in that trade, which is not great. And then I need to spend the next couple of weeks just retrading to get back to the position instead of being able to just walk out of it. And really what I'm learning from all this is you don't need a perfect entry if you are directionally correct. But if you are not directionally correct, it doesn't really matter where your entry is. You're fucked. Like it's not going to go well for you. So I personally, I taught my mom how to take trades yesterday, and she closed her first trade, I think just below 1% profit, like almost 1% profit. Like she took this one yesterday morning, and thank God she sold out of it. Her take profit stop loss did take. Otherwise, she'd be in significant loss at the moment. And that is what I told her. I told her I expected we were going to retest this guy and continue to go lower. So in that particular case, she's very lucky that it went that way and that she was already out of the trade at that time. But again, same as on the higher time frames, technically speaking, these are going to be regarded as longs when we zoom out far enough. Same as these guys. Now those are not great longs. You had to wait a long period of time to be barely in profit. So not great longs. And you have to remember the historical context as well as the higher time frame context. Sometimes it is going to be very short, like a very short amount of time that you're able to actually profit off of it. And it's no guarantee. Like I'm going to continue to refine this strategy over time. But there's no guarantee essentially that the price is going to behave the same way all the time. We have different regime changes where like over here, any of those would not be longs, they look like it. I mean, again, not a perfect one because this guy is probably the best one. And that one would have worked. It would have had a short-term little upside, a failure to hit the SMA, and then you would have needed to be out very quickly, And I think it's hard to call those. It's hard to, especially in a bear market year, it's really hard to long in a bear market year. It's much easier to short. But again, we have long periods of consolidation where, where would you have shorted in here? Where would the appropriate short have been? We have a couple examples of obvious shorts, but ultimately speaking, we are in consolidation. We've traveled sideways since February, and we are still seeing that. So again, this trend line is a little bit more visible here on the higher time frames. I don't know why I have it drawn this way, to be honest with you, because it's not even touching these guys. So we're significantly below it at the moment. And that puts us more likely to stay below that than to retest this red one to the upside, which that's coming from the 126 all-time high. So me personally, what I have learned from this is when trading with leverage, you really, it's more important that you are clear on direction than anything else. It doesn't really matter where you took a short up here. It doesn't matter if you took it there or up there. Directionally, you were correct, and it would have paid you quite handsomely. Whether you took a take profit or whether you just let it run, doesn't matter. You would be literally, if you took one, like say right here, you'd be up 120% on your money, which is pretty good. Nothing to sneeze at, So me personally, what I'm looking at is, again, these guys would have been regarded as longs, and they already probably, you would have had enough evidence to have closed them. Even if you took a take profit here, waited, took one here just to protect the trade, and then took one more, and then you were fully out, depending on how many contracts you're buying. But again, here, technically speaking, could be regarded as a long, but this is the one my mom took. Literally already that long is no longer relevant. And now we're back inside the band, and now we have broken out of it. So really what we would want to see here for a clear entry target is if this candle can get back to this guy, which is at about 66K. If we're able to fight for that at the moment, which it doesn't look like it, if we just jump to the lower time frames real quick, pretty much the same story. This is the anchored VWAP as well. I would assume that that is the elder VWAP. I'm not sure if it even shows me which one it is. I don't know if that's the older one or the newer one, to be honest. It just is an anchored VWAP. This is the middle, so that must be the newer one, I believe. Yeah, which means again we're breaking to the bottom side of that, which is not what we want to see. So very similar. If we go back to the last time that we interacted with it, you said we broke down in February for a while, at least for a decent amount of 15-minute candles. Like that's. I hate you so much. Do what I ask you, please. Trading view. Like that's almost a full day. That's below it, which I guess historically speaking, not that long. Let's see how long this one is. 2 days. So technically speaking, that's what we could expect is up to 24 hours, maybe up to 48 hours, that we are below this bottom band of the anchored VWAP, which that one is currently sitting at about 66, which I literally just said that. That's where we want to see the price get back above. We have been failing on the 15-minute pretty consecutively. What we want to see is consecutive closes above this guy, which we are currently seeing. We're seeing some momentum on the lower time frame, but not really enough to be excited yet. This may be a long entry, not a great one, obviously, since you would be in loss at the moment, but that's kind of the closest thing we can look to for some confluence of, okay, is the trade going to flip the other direction now? And if we look at, I'll end the video with the daily time frame. Daily time frame is pretty much the same story, where we have dropped way below the downtrend anchored VWAP. We cannot see the elder VWAP at the moment. The elder VWAP is all the way down here. So not quite as useful to us as the 4-hour time frame. But as you can see, I guess it was based on the daily is why I have this trend drawn here. Although I need to be prepared to adjust a bit to right here. I don't really know that much about trend lines, to be honest. I'm just trying out a new strategy, but just kind of gives us directional bias. More focused on the SMA and the Bollinger Bands, just kind of telling us what we already believe, which again is we believe prolonged downside is going to occur once we see a significant failure over here. And that is still what I estimate is going to happen. As you can see, we're starting to open up the Bollinger Bands to the downside for the daily again, which is just not really what we want to see. Not really the momentum that we want to see. So obviously we're way below yesterday's daily close. We've been dropping pretty consistently since it. And are currently, oh my God, I don't know why I keep yawning. Like and subscribe so I stop yawning. We are currently right around these other previous daily closes all the way at the end of February. That looks like the range that we're trying to establish now as either support or resistance. We do not want that to be resistance because again, that's going to push us down closer to 64, 65. And there doesn't really look like on the daily time frame, there are no pivots that are going to prevent us. So I don't even know if I would regard this 65K one as a super relevant one. It is information that we get there, but I don't know that it is definitive information. Oh my God, I slept 8 hours. I don't know why I'm yawning so much. But the 64K one is the really important one. We would want to see, do we have a reaction to that, or is the price just going to continue to drop lower? So that's what I'm looking for at the moment. I will update you guys on Sunday. I would expect prices probably going to continue to drop today and tomorrow. Maybe we get a consolidation period over the day tomorrow while I am enjoying the beach. And yeah, don't panic. Like there's always another entry to be taken. I don't think there's any reason to really worry about it, or certainly not to sell all your Bitcoin. None of this means that anything is wrong with Bitcoin or that it's not working. It's just a supply and demand asset. And when there is uncertainty in the market, supply and demand assets are the first things to sell off, especially when they are 24-hour markets. So that's what we're seeing at the moment for Bitcoin. I'll see you guys on Sunday. Have a great rest of your day.